Hit it, Tiffy.
Welcome to the MBE project.
Yes, baby. That was so much more than I bargained for.
Me too. Me too. I just felt like I was put on the spot. I didn't know what to do.
Honey, I loved it. That was everything. I'm going to tell you that at the start of every show now. Hit it, Tiffy.
Okay. It does. There's like so much that comes with it when you tell somebody to hit it.
Honey,
you know?
I know. That's all I had to say all this time, and you come to life.
It was very dutiful. It's a very dutiful directive. So I couldn't just let you down.
Hit it. Well, happy August.
Yes.
Well, wait.
Soon.
Is it? Yes,
it will
almost.
Yes.
Well,
yes,
okay,
yes.
I know what is true. Happy new moon. Happy new moon in Leo. And happy birthday to all of our MBE Leos out there.
Wait a second. Is the new moon happening today?
Wednesday. 31st.
Yeah, okay. Whoa. Mm-hmm. Boy, oh boy. This year is going way too fast.
In case you get, this is what happens. Tiffany and I, because of our schedules, we have to oftentimes record multiple things on one day. Like today, for instance, but it's often prior to the days that things will air. So please forgive us when we
Don't tell them our secrets.
Listen, it's just a thing. They should do it. If you have things you have to
Fair
do,
enough.
honey. Yeah, it helps, but we do tend to get confused with the days. So yes, when this airs, happy new moon in Leo, and happy birthday to all the lions and lionesses out there.
In fairness, it just gets confusing coming back down to planet Earth when we spend all our time up here figuring this stuff out and putting it out. So when we have to come back down to Earth, it gets a little confusing.
Keep your feet on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have a monthly energy update for our MB insiders. And just to let you guys know, this is definitely some
good stuff.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we're transitioning into this season, into this energy. Very thankful for the healing that happened in Cancer and in July. But yeah, thankful that we're moving into this Leo season, and you guys go and check that out. It's good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we're continuing on with our tarot journey. Before we get into our new suit and element, how were you doing with your fire? Did you pay attention to how you were directing your fire when we went through the wands?
Yes, I was. I noticed when it got a little bit crazy. And then I noticed when I was really being very focused and pouring myself into things, and it worked out well. But I also, because I was being observant of it, I also recognized when I needed to rein it in, because I was giving out some fire that didn't belong in places. And not like angry kind of fire, but just like too helpful with other people when it's like, I need this fire to do what I got to do because that stuff is going to help more people.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because hearing you describe it, and from my point of view of what I've seen you go through in the last month, it seems like you were more mindful of how you were directing your fire and how you were utilizing it. And I think for me, it was a question too. So I don't know if I was actually outwardly directing my fire in a particular way, you know what I mean? But I was more thinking about how I want to direct my fire moving forward, but that's still yet to be seen. So welcome Leo season.
Listen, it's a daily battle though, every day. I sit down, I'm like, I'm going to do this. And then it's like something pings over there or something pops up and I'm like, oh, this idea, I should research this. But
listen, we talked. That's the thing though, right? Because we started out with the cups, which was all about our emotion. We went to the wands, which was all about our fire. And while we can explore these energies and try to understand them, honey, if you don't get your mind right, you're going to have problems across the board. And so here we are,
find ourselves
in swords.
So it almost, now that you said that, I mean, we kind of were both like, I'll be full transparency. When I think about the swords, they scare me a little bit because there's a lot going on in these. And a lot of times you lay them out to people who don't really study tarot and they're terrified of a lot of them. And understandably so. But I just lost my train of thought. My train keeps falling off the tracks a lot lately. What was I thinking?
I don't know.
No.
Well, I'll
Right.
tell you this, maybe it'll jog your
Yeah.
memory.
Jog my
What
memory.
comes up for me of like with what you're saying, with swords, I think it can be off-putting and even cause us to want to run the other way because of the level of accountability, right?
Yeah.
Because we can often blame everything else on other people or outside things like, oh, I feel this way because they made me, or, oh, this project or this thing I was trying to do didn't work out because of others are out there. But your mind, like you are the one, I mean, you're the one that's in
The
charge of the
conductor.
other things too, but it's harder to deny your responsibility of your mind, your lens, how you process in these things. And granted, we've all been programmed. We've all been fed a lot of things that we are working to undo.
Mm-hmm.
The mind is a serious thing. I mean, whew, the mind is no joke. And it is, you think of that level of importance, absolutely this is something we want to explore and examine within ourselves because it's feeding into our emotion, it's feeding into how we use our fire, it's feeding into how we create, it is feeding into our projections, everything, our whole experience, you know, it all comes back to what's going on in that mind. So that's what I think it's like there's a level of accountability there that's hard to deny.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was coming back to me, but it's not now. I thought it was so important. Find it, brain.
Well, let me tell you. So why do you hear swords and get uncomfortable? Like, what about this suit makes you like, oh, no, thanks?
A lot of the visuals of the cards are stressful.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. And I mean, just swords are intimidating when you see them, you know, like a cup's not that intimidating, but you see a sword and it's double edged and it can slice through things, you know. So maybe that's kind of what it is also, is like it's no bull, you know, it's going to like really get to the heart of something.
Yeah. Well, you say that it reminds me of a conversation I had yesterday with a group of seekers, and we were talking about this, came up, how things that make us the most uncomfortable and things that trigger us the most are often like the biggest gift because they help us to reveal like what our stuff is and like what we still have opportunities to work through and work on and all of, you know. So yeah, these images can be disturbing, but whatever it's disturbing in us is like what we need to look at. Like, why is that disturbing to you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we should just say before we look at swords, ace through 4, swords is
Air.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a word in between, like represented or represent air. That's what
Associated
swords represent air. And as you can hear, it's related to our mental process, our thoughts, our mind. So ace of swords, you want to start us out, chicken?
I do. So this is the ace of swords and there's a crown, and when I see the crown and I see the garland, I always think of victory. So aces are, they're the essence of what the entire suit is. So, and ones are always beginning. So it's kind of showing us like everything that we have with, by way of using our mind and using our intellect, is that we'll always be victorious, assuming that we use it in the correct manner.
That's a key, right? If we use it in the correct manner. Yeah, when I look at this card too, what stands out for me is the crown at the tip of the sword. So one, that the sword is so upright, it makes me think of like alignment, but that crown reminds me of like the higher mind, maybe even literally like the crown chakra, or like our higher intelligence, our higher mind. But it's often like representing the highest form of truth, right? And it's coming out of this cloud, which we've seen in other cards, but it's like this could be a mental breakthrough for us. This could be the inspiration or like flash of insight that we've been waiting for, you know, because we oftentimes, talking about the mind, this thing can get real foggy, real confused. And so seeing this card. I think it is a reminder of like mental clarity even.
Well, I like that you bring up the word foggy too, because it looks like the hand is coming through the fog and like giving you the sort of intellect to be like, here you go, like cut through that because on the other side of it is victory.
Yeah. And with that, just with the mountains at the bottom of the card, sometimes it takes a lot. Sometimes we have to trek through a lot. There may be difficulty. There may be, even some conflict, whether inner or external, that we have to go through to get to this space of clarity and insight and, making way for that inspiration.
Yeah.
So what would it take for you to get to the Ace of Swords? Don't you love
and
those
also I think too that if the aces are always reminding us everything that we're capable of, within each element. So the ace is like, it's the gift you were given as your birthright. Like you were born with all of this stuff. So what will it take of your accountability of yourself to move the things out of the way to see that you already have it all,
right?
Versus trying to get like to it. One of my teachers said that her teacher told her there is no mountain. So when I think about like victory is just on the other side of the mountain, but if you're told, and I shared it with a friend one time and it blew my friend's mind. She was like, what? There's no mountain. But if you really think about it, it's like, no, you are the mountain and it's an illusion because you're creating it.
And that's the thing, right? That's the thing with the mind. Like we're the ones creating all of it. This is random, but this is my Ace of Swords moment recently. Actually, I had one today, but I'm not going to share it. But the other day, I went to the grocery store, and we all know how I feel about that. And as soon as I walked in, it was like, I could feel it coming on where like my whole system wanted to retreat and shut down because the grocery store. And immediately, as soon as I like walked in and I felt that happening, I had to like rein it in. I had to go straight to my mind and decide like, I got this. I'm solid in my space. I'm solid in my being. But I was allowing myself to click into my higher mind right away. I had to be in that space of mental clarity and focus as not to run away on this energetic overwhelm train.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my Ace of
Similar to that experience. I had one also Friday night and I knew better. I tapped in with my intuition. I was like, no, I think I'm going to go home. Like you guys have fun. But turned out that I ended up like staying with my friend because I didn't want her to be alone until she met up with the other people. And I ended up somewhere I didn't want to be. And I kept trying to tap into the higher mind, but the higher mind was like, I already talked to you earlier. They said not to do this and you decided to go against it. So it was like, here you go. So decisions, the swords are about decisions also, so really like, is it a change of perspective or are you going to use your higher mind and your self-wisdom to know what it is you should be doing?
Right.
And then how are you going to perceive the repercussions later on of decisions that you've made?
Well, the other thing with this one, the fog part, the hand coming out of the fog, this actually reminds me of Ace of Swords moment last night, which I told you. I'm not going to tell the whole story, but last night when I was going to sleep, I was in like a mental confusion or mental fog and just like irritated by it, quite frankly. And the most I could do was have an intention that while I was in my dream state that I would achieve some clarity. And that's what happened. It was like my Ace of Swords burst through the clouds of my dream state, and I woke up at 5:30 in the morning with like an insight that just blurted out of my mouth. So I think another thing is when we're struggling to get to this higher mind or struggling to get to a space of inspiration or like cut through the fog to get to our mental breakthrough, sometimes we just have to ask, like ask to be supported and let it go. Don't stress about it and trust that it's coming. Okay. Moving right along. The two of swords. Oh,
this one I kind of like. I kind of like this one because I feel like it oftentimes does freak people out, but I think it's one of the more innocuous ones.
What do you like about it?
I like that she's doing it to herself. And I think oftentimes we find ourselves there because there's another card similar to this one in the Suit of Swords where the woman is actually bound, but this one she's not. And she is holding the swords, and it's representing a stalemate or like indecision, or just non-movement in a direction. But she has a blindfold on that if she just lay down her sword, she could take the blindfold off and see and maybe make her decision. So it's self-inflicted. So I think there's some amount of freedom that comes when we realize that something's self-inflicted, because again, then it's this perception where you can say, okay, let me change this.
Something about her posture and the way she's holding those two swords, for me, it looks very intentional and very like, almost like, not stubborn, but I can't think of the word I'm wanting to say right now. No, like, God, indignant, like, no, I am not going to make a decision. And again, if the swords represent the mind, you have this two directions, but she's holding on to those swords very intentionally. You know what I mean? Like there's something strong in the way that she's holding it. So it reminds me of when we make that decision. It's not just that there's not clarity, like we're choosing to sometimes not make a decision. And maybe it's because we're not clear, but the choice is ours. Like sometimes we refuse to budge, we refuse to pick a direction. You know what I mean? Like sometimes we just get in those spaces where we're the ones in the way, kind of like what you said with the mountain in a way. But we oftentimes will say, for example, if you had like, oh, do I choose job A or B? And you're like, oh, like it's so overwhelming. And then you just go like, F it, I'm not choosing either one. Maybe I'm just going to wait till one of them calls me, but that's our choice. Like we're the ones taking that stance of, nope, I'm not moving, or I'm weighing the choices or whatever it may be. So it's interesting to me. She looks sturdy and peaceful to me. So I feel like it's a very like, not refusing to see, but kind of just like,
well, on the heels of that, the planet that's associated with it is the moon. And I know it's not a planet, but a celestial body is the moon. So the moon makes us go internal and kind of look inside. So maybe she's like, I'm not making this decision right now. I'm going to put my blindfold on because I don't want to be influenced by external things. I don't want to deal with
it, maybe?
Yeah, I want to go internal and see, like, I just need this time of quieting down what's around me in order to figure out what's going on inside first before making a decision.
I like that because I think it gives that lens of how we can see these in different ways. So it doesn't have to be just that a decision is so heavy, like, oh my God, but maybe it is like, just like you say, a choice, which is a totally different feeling, like maybe I need to, although that reminds me more of the 4, but I like where you're going.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. And then that body of water behind her too, which is interesting to this, like, you have the other elements present in this card. There's land very present. There's water, and here she is air.
Yeah.
But it's like all of those other elements are there, so maybe there's some emotion involved. Maybe it's something like logic versus emotion, like which way do I go? Honey, because that's a big one, right? When we're like in that war of, do I go with logic or feeling?
But the water also has me thinking of reflection and the moon that's hovering above the water and how it reflects back to itself, and the fact that her eyes are covered, so she could be doing an internal reflection.
Yeah. Very interesting. So obviously a lot of different ways there. As always, I'd love to hear what comes up for you. And again, if you have a deck that has different imagery, like what does this card say to you based on that? So
I'll show you the 2 ones that we missed for Chakra Tarot because they're beautiful.
Yeah. Those are pretty. 3 of Swords.
This is the one nobody likes to see.
What's interesting? Okay, so for those of you, if you're not watching on YouTube, just in podcast land, there's a picture of a heart with 3 swords going through it, and there's some clouds and some rain.
And it's
I don't
gray.
know why this card really doesn't disturb me. And I get why people would not like to see it because of a heart being pierced. It's like very jarring, maybe drastic, but I don't know.
I had to take some time with getting okay with it. And it was my empathic self had to deal with, I had to filter a lot of other people's fear and judgments around it. But what I like when I started to really understand this card, what I really appreciated about it was that it's hard to see it, but the bottom of the swords is all blue, and
Mm-hmm.
blue is the color of clarity. So it's almost saying like, even though the sword went through the heart, coming out the other side is going to be clarity.
And that's the thing. I think that's probably why this card doesn't bother me, because one of the things with this card too is it represents the first step to healing is accepting the wound, and it's true. And I think that, again, is probably because it resonates, or we can relate to. We've all had these types of experiences, or maybe we were in like a heartbreak or grief or whatever it may have been. And it can be the mind just goes haywire, right? It's like the lines get crossed. We're disconnected from ourselves. We're disconnected from our bodies. Like, it's hard to even process in the mind. And quite frankly, a lot of times we don't want to when we're in those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
But once we finally move through that, like the numbness, the confusion, whatever it may be, and we accept, like, yeah, I'm hurt, I'm sad, I'm grieving, I'm heartbroken, whatever it is, it's like that admission or that recognition often helps then to get the ball moving forward, where we can start taking those steps to clarifying what's really going on for us, letting our mind really be involved in the emotion so that we can start to heal.
And Saturn rules this card. And Saturn is the planet of lessons. So whatever lessons we learn from the pain, because we don't really learn anything if we're not thrown into that discomfort, or if something is very jarring to us. Those are the times that we do learn the most.
And I think the thing too about this heart, of why probably visually it's not that jarring to me, is the heart still looks vibrant,
Yeah.
With these swords going through it. And even though it's being disrupted, it's still alive. Like, it's still, has life in it. And so I think that's also a good reminder that when we're in those spaces that are emotionally hard, like, remembering that you're still capable of getting through it. And sometimes you just have to go through whatever you're going through in that moment. But in time, you will click into this space of recognition or knowing or self-acknowledgement that will support you through, or get help. Get help if you need it.
Look at her yellow blush that she has on. Very Lady Gaga of her.
Oh my God. Okay. So our final for today, we have the 4 of Swords. This one is peaceful for me too. It kind of, the sword that's down in below him, whatever he's laying on, and then the 3 swords coming towards him and his hands are in prayer position. This card really reminds me of the times where sometimes we know, like, we need to step back. Kind of like last night where I said, where I knew that trying to struggle with my mind wasn't going to help me. So I had to lay down a sword and go into a meditative state, which was sleep for me. I had to go into a different state of consciousness in order to allow myself to work through or stabilize or get to where I needed to be. So this card represents that for me, like recognizing sometimes you just got to lay down a sword in order to clarify.
And I see it coming from the 3 of swords into this one. It's like those are the 3 that stabbed the heart. And so now they're taking rest. It's like you've been on a tough journey, like you've had these obstacles, like rest and rejuvenate. And it's interesting because the planet is Jupiter. So Jupiter is expansion. And it's like, in order for you to expand, you need this time to rest so that you can plug the holes back up and then expand more. But I like how it's the idea of the 3 swords from the heart that are being pulled out of the body. And then they still have this one left, so there's still that amount of wisdom that came from that. Like, it's like the golden sword of the wisdom that you gained from the past challenges of the 3 of swords.
And that's the thing, right? Because we do gain so much wisdom when we get through all kinds of life circumstances. Like, that's how we grow. And it's often hard to hear that or even believe it when we're in the thick of things. But usually it's hindsight that gives us that, like, wow, yeah, I really did grow, or I really recognize my resilience, or whatever it may be. But I think it's interesting in this card is because he's so peaceful, it looks like, you know, it was a choice. It was a choice to just say, like, I need to step back. I need a time out. I need to get my mind right. And that's the thing, recognizing your choice. Like, it doesn't always have to be a battle. Like, sometimes like you just need to lay it on down.
Right. And this makes me think of, since I've been a personal trainer for almost 16 years now or something ridiculous, people who just go all the time, you know, the muscles never get it. If you don't rest, the muscles never get a chance to integrate all of the hard work you've done. And that hard work typically is stressful. I mean, if you're lifting weights and running, you're tearing the muscle very slightly in order to fill it back up to make it stronger, for it to build new fibers. And if it's in that constant state of ripping apart and trying to rebuild, and it never gets that time of rest where it actually can do the integration. And that's just like any form of healing. If it's physical or emotional, there's that period of rest is very, very important. And I think especially in our American society, we miss that. And how much we gain from the rest. So this card's really important.
It's all about balance, right?
Yeah, whatever that means.
And it's like the thing of, like, not being too hard on ourselves. And, you know, we were talking about in our energy update, like, respecting the cycle. Or was that in here? I don't know. It's all a blur. But, like, really respecting, like, where we're at any given time, and honoring, like, whatever part of our particular phase we may be in, because they're all necessary. And sometimes recuperating, you'll be like, hello, you can't just keep going. Like, you'll burn out, crash, or your mind, again, the mind needs rest, you know?
Yeah.
So
the rest will find you. So you may as well,
honey,
like we said, lay down your sword, respect it, and come back stronger.
That is a true story. Well, that is it for our swords, our air today. As always, we would love to hear what comes up for you, your translation of the cards. And next time we will go through swords 5 through 7. But one of the things we recommended at the start of this tarot journey is, like, giving yourself time to come into relationship with the cards. So that could look like, you know, maybe this week you just look at the Ace of Swords for a couple of days, and then meditate with it, write down whatever insights come through, what the message is for you, what you see in the card, feel in the card, and do it with all of them. And then, you know, again, share. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah. Thanks for being on the journey with us. I hope it's helpful.
Yes. So, is that it for today, Tiffy?
That's a wrap.
Okay. Bye.